Today is a big day for the world economy. U.S. President Joe Biden announced a ban on Russian energy imports a short while ago. Now, already the price of oil has been soaring to 13-year highs due to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. This means that prices will likely surge even higher and cost motorists around the world even more. Until now, the U.S. and Europe have been imposing incremental sanctions, possibly hoping that they could avoid recession and stop Russia's advance in the Ukraine. At the same time, a ban on energy products from Russia applies maximum pressure to that country. If we look at the numbers quickly, at the close of business in South Africa, oil was trading at $130 per barrel. That's Brent crude oil that we import for fuel. It's now trading at $132 per barrel, up by more than 7%. Yesterday, it neared $140. The good news is that the price of other commodities like gold and platinum are also high. That helps South African miners. But when it comes to oil, we are importers and really at the mercy of the global oil price. Well, the U.S. announcement follows a similar move from the United Kingdom that announced it would phase out imports of oil and refined petroleum products from Russia by the end of the year, while the EU Commission also outlined a plan to make Europe independent from Russian fossil fuels before 2030.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support their Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war. We made this decision in close consultation with our allies and our partners around the world, particularly in Europe, because a united response to Putin's aggression has been my overriding focus, to keep all NATO and all of the EU and our allies totally united.
SABC News correspondent in New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, joining us live now. Sherwin, thank you as always. So it wasn't clear we were going to see this level of coordination. He spoke about the united action there, and this is a fairly united front, even though they're going to phase in Europe and more of an immediate ban in the US. Give us the latest.
Well, there was a sense that the United States, Francis, would go it alone, that this action would be a more unilateral, say, than the previous announcement of punitive measures against Russia. But we did see statements out of the United Kingdom saying they will phase out Russian oil imports by the end of 2022, by the end of the year. The UK also looking to reduce UK gas from Russia. They will ban, the ban also applies to refined products such as diesel, which apparently the United Kingdom relies on for about a third of their import supplies. The ban will, as yet, not apply to natural gas. We saw from the European Commission earlier that they plan to make Europe independent from Russian fossil fuels before 2030. So there is a years-long timeline. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen saying we must become independent from Russian oil, coal and gas. We simply cannot rely on a supplier who explicitly threatens us. And then, of course, you saw the announcement from President Biden a short time ago, of course, talking on the back of bipartisan support. There are efforts within the House of Representatives to pass legislation. There were bipartisan efforts in the Senate to pass legislation in terms of banning these imports in the absence of White House action, which we have now seen. President Biden, Francis, talking about cutting off the main artery of Russia's economy. They do not want to be part of subsidizing what he called Putin's war. He said they are coordinating, of course, with all the NATO and EU allies. Defending freedom is going to have a cost on the consumer in the United States. And their direct reference to the fact that a gallon of petrol in the United States, almost about 4 liters, costs about $4 a gallon. which is the highest that we've seen in the United States since around 2008, which was the height of the economic difficulties around the world, no less the recession in the United States that affected around the world. And you talked a bit about the oil price and how that's going to affect South Africa. The oil price, of course, overnight reaching around $130 a barrel. Just weeks ago, it was in the 90s, and before that, the 80s. So that we've seen a precipitous rise in the oil price, and that, of course, is going to have implications not just in the United States, but certainly in economies around the world, Francis.
Yes, indeed, Sherwin. Here, a debate about how high can it go? Can we even see a doubling of the fuel price going up to 40 Rand potentially per litre? Yesterday, you were looking at those ripple effects. You watched a humanitarian briefing in the Security Council on Ukraine and concerns about the effects, the invasion and the punitive economic measures being imposed in response as well. Fuel prices, food insecurity, a great exporter of grain as well. What are we learning as we go along?
Yeah, the UN Emergency Relief Coordinator, the Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, briefed the Security Council yesterday as the United Nations works to establish predictable humanitarian corridors due to the escalating humanitarian crisis. We hear from the United Nations now that over 2 million refugees have fled Ukraine. That number is the fastest refugee crisis in Europe in a number of, since certainly World War II. Martin Griffiths saying that he's deeply worried about the consequences of vulnerable people living, Francis, half a world away. Food prices are spiking. Supplies are uncertain. We didn't need that either, he says. People in the Sahel, in Yemen, in the Horn of Africa, Afghanistan, Madagascar already face profound food insecurity. And then he talks about how record-level fuel prices mean life becomes harder in places where there has been a dearth in terms of supplies, and places like Lebanon, places around the world where their difficulties are now going to be exacerbated by this. And then the Deputy Permanent Representative of Kenya, Ambassador Michael Kibiono, took the floor to really lay this out from an African perspective. I thought it's worth our viewers back home having a watch of what he had to say next.
The resulting sharp prices increase are likely to plunge multiple countries into food insecurity and, as a result, possible political turmoil. In addition to Ukraine's key place in global food supply system being impacted by the conflict, the world will also suffer greatly from the unilateral and regional sanctions against the Russian Federation. We have previously urged that humanitarian and legal consideration be given to the impact on the Russian people of these sanctions. Now we must add our concern for the many, including in our own country, who will suffer all over the world. While the sanctions are aimed at responding to the inexcusable armed breach of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity by the Russian Federation, they will end up harming not only the innocent in Russia, but also millions around the world, particularly in the global south.
Kenya's ambassador there, Francis, saying the humanitarian impact of this conflict will be felt far beyond Ukraine because of the shock to the global food supply system. And when you think about the difficulties Africa, West Africa in particular, have been facing in terms of insecurity already post the pandemic, right? The difficult developmental needs and the trajectory of a lot of these economies exacerbated now by the tensions that are emerging post this conflict. The ripple effects will be felt globally, and Africa needs to be warned that instability, which is already rife in certain parts of the continent, could now be exacerbated by the economic effects of what we are seeing emanating from Ukraine.
Sure. Thank you for that. SABC news correspondent live for us from New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, talking about the breaking news tonight around oil imports.